Hi, welcome to week 4 of exterior trim basics. Today we're going to pick up right where we left off last class. We're going to finish trimming out the soffit of this model and then start preparing and installing fascia. Just to obviously refresh where we left off. We just need to get one more piece of soffit board under here so that we can start preparing and putting on our fascia, which goes here. And we learned that this is the sub fascia back here. So obviously the sub fascia is right behind the fascia. So this board has a few things that need preparing. We need to get the router going and make a dado so that it can click into this piece that we left overhanging here. So I'll just go over there and rough cut a piece of the 1x10 and get that so we can cut it on the saw. I got my piece here. So once it's all said and done, if you look under here, there's gonna be a freeze board, what we call a freeze, which the size of the freeze board is determined by the plan. But the freeze board goes under here like this. And it actually has a pack out behind it. So there would be a piece of 1-inch pack out that's gonna hold this freeze board away from the wall an inch, and the shingles are gonna tuck under it. So the reason for me telling you that is this whole area here is gonna get completely buried by something else. So I'm gonna make sure that this damage on the board is facing somewhere where it's gonna get buried by another piece of trim. So if I hold this board up like where I'm actually gonna be hanging it, I know that I can just leave the damage pointing this way and nobody will ever see it because it's gonna get buried by an inch of trim, you know what I mean? So that's part of why you always wanna be inspecting your piece here. So now, because the fascia is also gonna be covering the other edge, neither of these actual edges here matter. But you just need to make sure that you don't hang the board so that the damage is right in your face because then it looks bad. So we know we have our 45 outside corner joint there. So I'm literally just hanging this, I'm holding this up here so I can visualize how I'm gonna put it up. Because sometimes you might not be standing right next to your model and you just need to envision where you need your piece to go. So it's gonna hang up under there just like that with the damage facing out of vision. And I know I'm gonna need my long point up here on the top. So I've oriented my saw on a 45 accordingly. And just go ahead and cut this. As you can see, I actually cut the damage right off the board. Perfect. That's exactly what you would want to do. Now, because this is so small, I can actually take this and mark it in place. But I'm going to hold it up under here because this is also going to give me a chance to test my angle, to see if those angles are meeting up at a nice spot, like they're meeting up and look nice without any weird gaps or anything. In order to test this angle, what I need to do is hold it up under here and use my 1/4 inch feeler block, we call it, to make sure that my angle is looking good. So I arranged it. Now if you guys actually come peek under here with me. Now, you can see that that's sitting in there pretty tight. You know what I mean? If it looked like this, you would have a problem, right? If it looked like this, you'd have a problem. You know what I mean? Either the cut was messed up or something else is not perfect here to where this might not be a perfect 45. But in our scenario, I just use my feeler blocks. Now, if you don't test the 1/4 inch here and here, you might actually end up moving this and using this, testing this out isn't gonna be accurate for you unless you test the 1/4 inch on both spots to make sure that it's sitting where it's gonna go. So you can make yourself these 1 to 2 foot scraps so that you can actually carry it up to wherever you're trimming. because obviously this is gonna be like, you're gonna be dealing with like 16-foot long boards and longer pieces than this. So you can actually test these angles up there with a nice little, with a scrap piece of trim before you put it on your finished piece and risk like wasting material, you know what I'm saying? So testing your angles is always gonna be like the go-to. Like if I'm trimming, if I'm working on trim, I'll have like a pile of these things on me to where maybe I'm like, okay, that 45 didn't work out. I can shout down to my cut guy, pass him this and be like, cut a 46 and let's try that. Test it out again and again and again until I love it, so that when I go to put whatever angle I find onto my finished piece, it's perfect. You know what I mean? I don't have to find out when I get it up there that something is wrong. So these we call it a tester block, and it can literally be a piece of garbage, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a nice piece of trim. It can be just a scrap. And it's important to hold on to your trim scraps, not just throw them away, because you're gonna constantly need these tester blocks, and you're gonna go for the scrap instead of cutting out of full boards to make tester blocks that are essentially gonna go in the garbage. Get a tester block under there, test out your angles. It's worth the extra step to save yourself a headache later. Got it? Okay. So I need to add something under here, a piece of framing, a block to catch this joint, because there's nothing for me to screw into. So I'm gonna cut a 6-inch 2x4. All right, now here's my block. Now I can slide it in there like this on that seam. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a screw through this AZEK while I hold my fingers. I'm gonna hold the block with my hand, but I'm gonna make sure that I'm not holding my finger right where I'm putting a screw up. So I'm gonna put 2 screws in this block, but when I put this one in, I'm gonna hold my fingers over here and vice versa on the other one. Okay. So I got my screw started. Now this block with that one screw is already solid enough for me not to even have to hold it and risk screwing into my finger on the second one. So I'm gonna put another one in. Every 45 corner joint needs at least 3 screws in it. Okay, so I taught you the 2 screws pattern in the field, but when you have a joint here, you need 3 along that joint. So what I need to do is pull a quick number from my long point out here to the weather cut. Here I have 23. So come over here. I'll cut this to 23. And that's going to be to the short point of a 45 bevel. Okay. I've already cleaned this board before I got it up here, and now you can see why I did that before carrying it up there with my dirty hands, making it even more dirty. So I'll just get a good amount of this glue on the brush, and I'll lay it on there thick. Like, you want a lot of glue on this. I'm just gonna make sure that the whole entire contact area has an even solid layer of glue on it. Now, you literally want this stuff to drip out when you squeeze these 2 boards together, okay? So same thing, I'll come over, smush it together. And this stuff works really fast too, which is why you want to try to be quick once you get the glue on there to get a couple screws in to hold your piece so you can mess with that glue joint. So there it is, just like before. But now, when I screw this one down, I'll be able to adjust the joint. So now I'm already at a place where I can stop and wipe this glue down. which is what, like, you want to try to do that as quickly as possible, because the glue is drying as soon as it, is making contact. So now what I can do, now that I have my block under there, you see how these aren't driving perfectly well. I can pull the felt tip off and adjust the, back out these screws a little bit so that this one comes down and those marry together really nicely without having that, it's like an eighth or so, where it's this one sticking down below that one. You're gonna run into this all the time. I'm just gonna adjust these until I absolutely love it. It really doesn't take much. You're not gonna, I'm just lightly hitting the impactor to get it to come out a little bit. Get those to marry up nicely. That I'm pretty happy with, okay? So I'm gonna finish screwing my piece on every lookout block and every 16 inches here. The lookout blocks are already 16 on center. You wanna screw every 16 inches, so. And I'm putting my third screw to finish that joint. So now that there's 3 screws, I wipe my glue. I have screws every 16 inches. Now I'm good. I know that this piece is good for me to walk away from for now. Right now what I'm gonna do is stop, now that I've finished this step, and bung everywhere that I can. Okay, so once you put the bungs in the screw holes, it's kind of like sealing the deal. So bungs can be extracted and you can still get at that screw, but why would you waste the bungs? Why would you waste the time when, if you know you're gonna need to adjust a screw at some point, don't bother bunging it. But you do wanna bung as soon as you possibly can, because that's gonna stop the water and the weather from getting up or maybe down into your screw holes or whatever and cause some blistering or maybe some unwanted, damage to the board if you leave the bungs out too long. So you can peel these strips off like that, okay? I'm just gonna set my excess down in a clean space. I don't want them to get all dirty and wasted. And then I'm gonna take my finger, my thumb, and back it like that and just push on the bung and pull. And it just comes right off. So you can do this really quickly, I've already adjusted my joint here so I can bung these. See how quick and easy that is? So I bunged every hole that I wanted to bung, leaving these end ones out, like I said, because maybe it's the end of the day and I'm not gonna have time to get to the fascia. So bunging all these inner ones. And the same thing here, I'll bung my joint because I'm all set with it. All right, so now I can go back with my hammer. So I'm just wiping off the tip. See all the dirt that came off of it? So after I did that, I'm just gonna very lightly tap the bungs. And as long as you put your screws in straight and not angled or weird, the bung should seat in there really nicely. And once it's flush, I'm not gonna keep hitting it, because then you're gonna risk damaging the AZEK or marring up your piece, which you don't want. Good. You're always gonna be able to see them when you're up close. But if this was 30 feet in the air, it looks like there's no bungs, no screws, and no nothing. And that's the look that you're looking for. Okay, all my bungs are in. Now at this point in time, this soffit would be okay to leave overnight. And I could come back the next day and put my fascia on and wouldn't have any issues. I wouldn't have bungs where I don't want them, and every hole that could get bunged is already bunged. So another thing at this point that you'll want to do is actually wash your trim, your finished product. Now it's up there and you're ready to clean it, okay? So same thing. This is upside down, so I'm not gonna spraying up. It's just gonna be dripping all over me. But you can just spray the rag. We'll give you the same thing. And I'm literally just physically gonna wipe this down with my simple green. Clean any dirt that might have gone on it from my hands or whatever it is, okay? Now it's cleaned. So we can start preparing our fascia now. So the fascia goes right on, and the outside corners here, they have 45 cuts, which I'm going to show you in a second. So the first one I'm going to put on is over here. I like to kind of just start in one end and work it to the next. So I'm going to start in one spot and work my way around, okay? So I'll take a rough number for this again. So let's go, I'll fly this one a little bit past and have it at 38. Let's do that. So now we're going to router the back of these boards, and I'm going to pick a side that's going to be my face, okay? Like I always want to pick out my nice side is going to be my face. As we talked about, generally the part that's going to protected by this wrapper here is always going to be my face. This board wasn't too well taken care of, but I'm sure the back side of this doesn't look any better. So generally the part that has the plastic on it is always going to be your face. So I don't have plastic here. This is a scrap. I'm just inspecting the board real quick. Okay, I actually like this side better as my face. It's cleaner. So I'm gonna choose that as my face, and that I automatically know what the back of the board is. So when you do this now, I have the face down on the table. I'm not gonna drag it across the plywood and risk scratching it all up and stuff like that. So I have two routers set up, and the reason why is because this cut is gonna take 2 passes. Now I have a tester here that me and my father, when we set the routers up, we tested it out on a piece of AZEK. You're going to do the same thing. Now remember, I talked about tester blocks. Here's another example of where you're going to want to make sure that you're saving all your scrap so that you have a piece of scrap to do this on and not waste more material. So this dado or rabbit, it can be called either or. We have 7/8 that way, and it's 3/8 deep. Okay, so the reason that is, so you know that it needs to click into a piece of 3/4. Okay, hang on, just like that. It's going to click into a piece of 3/4. I made it 7/8 because that's going to give you just a tiny bit of wiggle room for imperfection. So you're always going to want to expect minor imperfections. Certain imperfections can't just be fixed. The framing needs to get taken apart or whatever if it's bad enough. But that 7/8 is just going to allow us a little bit of breathing room when the 3/4 clicks into it. Okay, and it's good to have that gap there because you never know. Maybe a little bit of this is happening on the soffit or whatever it is. You're not going to want it to be super tight to the point where it's like scraping up the AZEK and you have to like hit it in with a hammer. Like, no, this is super easy, fits right in there nicely. Okay, so you remember how we used our 1/4-inch block to set the soffit with, so that's sticking past the 1/4 inch. This dado is actually 3/8 deep. That's an eighth bigger than a 1/4 inch, obviously. And that's same thing, allowing us for that wiggle room there. So I'm never gonna be like pushed out by the soffit, and I'm never gonna be too tight on the width of the notch or the dado. So I'll show you guys how to run this now. The router tends to be pretty dusty. I don't know if you guys have ever worked with it, but one thing, there's a little trick that I like to use when doing this, is I'll just take some hand banger nails. I like also having these on me at all times. It's just a 3-inch spike or 3-inch hand nail, we'll call it. So you could actually take these and just set them in a little bit. And what that's going to do for you is hold your piece against something. There's no need to set them in crazy deep. It'll be easier to pull later, and I'm not going to be pushing on them that hard, but I'll just put a few in. Now, I'm right-handed. I like to start, so actually, it doesn't have anything really to do with right or left-handed. You're routing anything out, you want to think clockwise. And the reason why is because whichever way the router spins, it goes through easiest if you turn the router clockwise. So yes, this is a straight cut, but if I imagined a circle here, so I'm gonna route it from left to right. So if I imagine that as a circle, it would be clockwise. Usually left to right does the same thing for you. You know what I mean? So it always wants to go clockwise. Anyways, you could also screw a board down to the table if you wanted. That would produce the same thing for you. And the main reason why you have to do this is because I have these fences on this router, both routers, which can be set and adjusted. You know, you can turn these knobs and move this further away, and you can also set this deeper, the blade, but I already have it perfectly set for what I want it to do. You know, I took my tape, I measured 3/8 because I knew that's how deep I wanted this blade to cut. So I set the blade at 3/8, and then I used my tester piece to dial this in. You know, I drew a line on my tester piece where I wanted my reveal to be. So let me just explain this to you guys a little bit better here. So anytime you have a dado, you have a reveal. This meat that's left not cut is called the reveal. And the reason why is because once you lock it into your fascia, if you looked under there, your fascia would sit flat. When you lock it into your soffit, rather. Your soffit will be sitting tight here, but this piece is going to be exposed. You'll be able to see that. It'll be a finished part, and we call that a reveal because it kind of hangs down and it reveals, you can see it. So I'm also going to want to make sure that I don't have any damage on the board where my reveal is going to be, which I do. Okay, so this piece is plenty long enough for me to work, but see these blue Mars? These aren't going to be able to come out. So you don't want these marks on your reveal. But I know I can cut it out, so I'm going to still router this piece anyways, because the rest of this reveal is looking pretty good. Okay. Also, on a fascia, the bottom of the fascia is also going to be exposed, the bottom edge, because when it's hanging up there, you'll be able to look up and see that edge. So I'm going to also want to make sure there's no damage on that. So I'm further just inspecting my board real quick. That's pretty dirty, actually. They're both pretty dirty. So I'm going to use this side because it's the better of the worst. And it can be cleaned. All right, so now that I know that this is my bottom, that I have a good reveal here, and I have a clean face on the other side, I'm ready to do this. So just plug in my router, which, like I said, is already set. It's a pretty easy dado to make. You're literally just going to want to make sure you ride your fence nice and flat along this edge. You don't want to push it so hard that the fence is going to scrape the edge as you go. You just want to nice and firm and easily glide it along that edge and let this fence do all the work for you. So I'll demonstrate that right now. One tip I will give you is you can see that this fence has two sides on it. I'm gonna hold my blade away from the wood so I'm not accidentally jamming it into the wood, and just put this fence on it first. So, you know, see how I'm kind of holding it way away so that I can, you know, start clean and not be like accidentally hitting the wood with the blade once I like first dip in. All right, now our first pass is done. Now, the reason I have two routers set up is so that I don't have to readjust the router every time I need to do two passes, because that would just be too time consuming. So we had our first router set up to take the majority of the notch out, and now we're going to take less with that because it's smaller, and also it doesn't need to take as much. Just needs to get us that 7/8 that we want. So Let me demonstrate the second pass real quick. And that's that. I'm making sure that my router isn't rocking around on me. I'm just keeping it nice and flat because you can mess up this reveal edge here if you let the router dig into it, which as long as you're nice and smooth and clean with it, and make sure that this is staying flat against the edge and that this is staying flat on the top, you won't have any problems. What I'm gonna do is just start a couple of screws because it's gonna make my life easier. I'm gonna come back away from my end a little. I'm staying about 3/4 to an inch down from the top is plenty. And just gonna start a couple so I can get it up there for you guys. Okay. See, now I have plenty of room here, but it's not gonna be too far down so that the drip edge, when this roof comes over and covers it, is gonna still cover this top. So you want it to be close, but you don't want it to be hitting that plywood and causing your piece to bump down like that. But either way, I'm over here. I'm lining up my short point of my outside corner on the edge there, and I leave it sticking out literally like a 30-second prod from the corner. And what that's going to do is, once this piece comes, they're going to marry together really, really nicely. Now what I'm doing here is with one hand, I'm holding up firmly so that my dado marries up with that soffit really nicely and tight. I'm just gonna do the same thing over here. Now my piece is up there. But I think that's about all we have time for today anyways. So today we learned how to prepare fascia, make rabbets with the router, and first step we got into installing the fascia. I'm gonna literally just leave it just like this and we'll pick right back up where we left off next week.